Gerald Ford was on his way out of the White House. Jimmy Carter on his way in. Oakland Raiders, Minnesota Vikings headed to Super Bowl. Where are we? Super Bowl 11. Tonight's the Night by Rod Stewart, #1 song on the radio. Average American income, $18,264 a year. Gas was 64 cents a gallon. The Worldwide Wrestling Federation was just a territorial promotion at the time, covering the Northeast from Maine down to, I guess, what was the dividing line? Maryland, maybe? A little bit of Maryland? Richmond, maybe? Okay. Top dog Bruno Sammartino was starting the year as champion, as he had since like 1973. Business as usual, and then steps in one of the most flamboyant, groundbreaking characters in the business to date then, and maybe arguably to date now. Certainly a template for much of what you've seen since the superstar, Billy Graham.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about 1977. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. My pleasure to be with such a professional organization, by the way.
If he only knew. Is there a desire by guys in the locker rooms throughout the U.S. outside of the Northeast to want to go to New York, either because,
yes,
hey, I only got to work 8-10 minutes.
Oh, yes, of course.
Pedro's going to go soft on me, and except for that stomach punch.
Except for the stomach punch.
And also a lot of big houses up there.
Yes, it was the ultimate place, the mecca, to wrestle in Madison Square Garden. Bruno Sammartino told me that every one of his opponents, who for the first time wrestled in Madison Square Garden, beat him to death because they were so frightened and so psyched about being in Madison Square Garden. And for some period of time, Bruno was wearing a hairpiece. That afro-looking thing he had was a hairpiece. It was a weave.
Oh, gotcha.
It was a weave. And he said that, for instance, Stan Hansen, who broke his neck accidentally,
right,
he said he would pull my hair and almost pull this weave thing off of my head because of the sight of being in Madison Square Garden. So that was the ultimate goal of every wrestler, was to reach Madison Square Garden, despite the fact that the caliber of wrestling was subpar.
Right. What about the perception of Vince J. McMahon as a promoter at the time, 77?
Senior,
yeah.
Senior. The perception was he was the extremely successful promoter. You had Boston. You had, as you mentioned earlier, we were all the way down to Hagerstown, Maryland. We were all the way up to Portland, Maine, Bangor, Maine. So it was an enormous area. And Vince Sr. was a gentleman, respected and admired by the wrestling crew. I was so popular at the time, I actually approached, you had kids out there making homemade t-shirts that said Superstar, okay? There's photos, this is documented in some of Dan Lurie's earlier mags. There's actually photos of hordes of kids with homemade Superstar t-shirts on it as a heel champion. I approached Vince Sr. and I said, there is a day coming, Vince, that I will be a babyface. And when that day comes, we need to at least start making t-shirts. Yeah. And Vince Sr. tells me,
he's great.
Vince Sr. tells me, he says, well, Superstar, I'm really not into marketing.
To come out of a McMahon's mouth.
To come out of
no one would believe it, right?
Yeah, Senior.
Yeah,
Senior,
I got you.
Gentleman. A gentleman. I'm really not into marketing, Superstar. I'm just interested in the product.
And a mindset of many of the promoters at the time, and probably why it was easier for younger Vince to come in and do what you did, because that mindset of not the marketing, just the product. Vince used the marketing later on, of course. This is a history lesson. You don't want to hear me. You want to hear him.
That's good history. That's important history, though.
Eddie Graham. Relationship between the Grahams, between Eddie and Vince Sr.
Almost joined at the hip. They concocted the first NWA Harley Race Championship match versus the WWWF, 3 Ws, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, Superstar Billy Graham, versus Harley Race, NWA champion in the Orange Bowl. That was Eddie Graham's original thought, and presented this to Vince Sr. And so, of course, it came to pass. And so that was a real moment in history when you had these 2 titles against each other in the winner take all. And so that was all an Eddie Graham original thought, because Vince Sr. did not think in those terms.
Right.
He did not think of those terms. He thought strictly in the terms of the Northeast. But Eddie Graham, being the genius and the almost prophet, could foresee things of this nature, and could foresee a belt versus belt contest for the first time ever, convinced Senior to pull this thing off. And it did come to pass on a rainy night in the Orange Bowl. And for the first time in my life, I had to wrestle 60 minutes.
We'll get there. Well, we're going to get to it.
Okay. So it was Eddie Graham's creation.
Right.
From his genius to come up with.
And because of the relationship he had with Vince, he was
the close
receptive
relationship,
to it.
yes, the close relationship, the working relationship, the business relationship, and the respect of each other. That I'm not going to tread on your territory, you're not going to tread on mine. That was the territory days, the respect.
Yeah.
So Vince had this enormous respect for Eddie Graham.
So early '77, what are the negotiations bringing you into New York?
What were the negotiations?
Yeah, how are you? Who you
I was
approached
I was called by Vince McMahon Sr. in Phoenix in '76, late '76, and Vince said, tracked me down to the gym, said, "Superstar, Vince Sr. Hey Vince, how are you, sir?" He said, "Listen," he said, "Bruno wants to retire. Bruno's tired." And in that era, the rings were mostly boxing rings. Hard as the carpet we're sitting on. And it took a toll on Bruno. And it took a toll on all of us, the hard boxing rings. And Vince said, "Bruno wants to step down, and I would like you to become the interim champion, and then we're going to make Bob Backlund the champion." And I said, "Who is Bob Backlund?" Because at this point, Bob Backlund was an unknown. And he said, "Well, he's an up-and-coming kid that we believe will be the next Bruno Sammartino."
And we'll talk about who sold him that bill of goods in a couple of minutes. But so you were told from the first phone call that your role in coming to New York would be to take the title, drop the title.
Yes, and the exact date, the exact date of the title change from Bruno to me, April 30th, 1977, Baltimore, maybe April 29th or 30th, 31 or something, 77. And the exact date, 11 months later, of the day I would drop it to Bob Backlund, was laid out on the table.
That's risky.
Was set out.
That's risky. From a business standpoint, right?
Yes. But it was all done also with a handshake. There were no contract negotiations or signatures whatsoever. It was done by a handshake and created by a phone call, an invitation from Vince McMahon to me. Well, of course, I'm going to say I'm thrilled. I would be honored to be this interim champion.
For a couple of months prior to coming in full time and winning the belt, you brought in just for TV tapings once a month from Florida, right?
Yes.
Why was it done that way? Was it just to fulfill the obligation and ride out your time for Eddie?
Why was the taping done this way?
Why were you brought in while you were still working in Florida just to do the TV for Vince and then back to Florida?
Brought in, they were doing 3 weeks of taping at one session, at one night. 3 separate hours of tapings,
Right.
3 separate weeks of tapings,
Right.
and then edited in. So it was to expose me to the New York market. Excuse me. And at the same time, still continuing to wrestle in Florida instead of sitting idly by.
Right.
And so the object was to bring me in and to expose me to the New York market, so the New York market would know who. And the first night, the first day I came into New York, we were taping in Philadelphia. Vince McMahon Sr. Meet him for the second time. He introduces me to the Grand Wizard. And he says, "Superstar, this is the Wiz, the Grand Wizard, and he's going to be your manager." I said, "Really?" It just caught me off guard because I never had a manager, and I was perfectly capable of cutting my own promos
Right.
and speaking for myself. And so I said, "He's going to do what?" Nothing against the Grand Wizard at all. Nothing. But I was not told this. And so I said, "He's going to be my manager?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "Vince, you and I, right now, need to go over in a corner and sit down and talk." And that's what we did. And we went over into an isolated corner. And I explained to Vince Sr. that I've never really had a manager, a little bit with Humperdinck in Carolina, in Florida, which really wasn't a manager. It was just a fun thing. I still cut my own promos and did my own thing. And I said, "You know, Vince, I'm just not comfortable. I've never had someone basically speak for me, okay? You know, because that is part of my persona and my offering to the people is my personality and my charisma. And so to share part of me with the manager, I said, I don't know if I'm prepared to do that. I don't know, nothing against the Grand Wizard personally, but it's just the concept. I was not prepared because I was not told this.
Sure. What did he say?
And he said, "Billy," never forget it, "Billy," he was almost crying. "Billy, just do it for me." Vince Sr., he says, "Just try it." He says, "Just try
It's
it."
your second time meeting him. Do it for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Vince, do it for me. I said, "Well, who are you?" "Do it for you? Who are you?" And so Vince McMahon Sr. actually tells me, "Please, Billy, just do this for me." And I'm saying, well, okay, here I am, and this is a big deal. And so I need to make this thing work. And so I saw the Wizard, and I saw his little turban and all his little stuff. And I was a little bit familiar with him anyway because I'd seen some earlier things of the Grand Wizard and this crazy stuff. And I thought, well, I can make this thing actually work. So I took the Grand Wizard and we sat down together at that very first night. And I said, "Wiz, you will be my manager. We'll share our interviews. But you will also be like a valet for me. You will prep me. You'll comb my hair for me. You'll take my sunglasses off. And you'll take my boa off. And you'll try to pull the t-shirt off my pythons. And we'll make this thing work." Because it had to work. Because I was there. And so it actually turned out to be a perfect marriage of the Grand Wizard being this flamboyant, berserk little guy, this crazy little guy, taking my sunglasses and combing my hair and primping me. I almost said pimping me, but I didn't. Primping me. And so it was actually a marriage made in heaven. It was a perfect fit. It was a perfect fit.
When you came from Florida into the WWWF rings, did you have to change your style of work and just a physical mat style with the guys that were up north versus Florida?
No, because I was never a skilled practitioner of professional wrestling. as the NWA boys were. I was more of a strength versus strength type situation. And Eddie Graham saw my limitations, and there was never a need for me to become a skilled Ric Flair technical performer. So it was a very easy transition.
Gotcha.
Because I was never a real wrestler to
Gotcha.
begin with.
77. Give us the power structure a little bit. I'm going to give you some names. I want you to tell me to your best of recollection in 77 what their roles were in the company. Willie Gilzenberg.
It's hard to remember. It's hard to remember. Of course, I know these people. It's hard to remember because they were so old school people that the office that Vince had was in the Edison Hotel.
Yes.
You're familiar with that?
That is in Washington, right?
No,
At the
this
time?
was in New York.
Oh, they
City.
already been in New York. What was the place in
He
Washington?
had a place in Washington. This was
When it was
way back
Capitol.
before.
That's when it was Capitol.
That's when it was Capitol.
Yeah.
Vince Sr. had a temporary office in a building called the Edison Hotel, rat infested.
Right, on 40,
Yes,
I know,
Times Square.
46th Street. Or
Times Square.
48th Street, yeah.
Times Square. Half the size of this room, maybe barely a third the size of this room, and that is where he came in a day before the garden and the taping and all of that, and opened up his book and did the booking, and there were these seats like we're sitting in, rows of older gentlemen who had already been previously in the business that Vince Sr. would give a couple $100 to as a payday, as a favor, as a gentleman to take care of some of these older guys. And the first time I walked in his office and I saw Vince Sr. sitting there with Arnold Skolin, and I saw these older gentlemen sitting around and like this, and I said, this is the most surreal thing. We are talking about Madison Square Garden here, folks.
Sure.
And I'm in a little bitty closet for an office like this, you know. And I'm asking Arnold Skolin for 2 tickets, and I'm the main event. And Arnold Skolin stingily peels off, Arnold Skolin barely can give me 2 tickets, and I'm the one selling the building out, okay? For a few guests. One was Dan Lurie, sitting with Valerie at the time, my wife Valerie at the time.
Yes.
And so this was the surreal, rat-infested hotel, the Edison Hotel, that is the temporary office for the Northeastern United States wrestling, millions of dollars of income.
Wasn't Titan Tower. Wasn't Titan. But these are the power players I'm talking about. Skolin, Phil Zacco. Gilzenberg, even
Phil
Monsoon,
Zacco.
who had a piece of the company.
Yes.
Yeah.
Phil Zacco, I got paid every 3 weeks. When I was champion, I had to sign a contract, as the contract came when I was champion, that they would take 1/3 of my paycheck and set that aside to make sure that I gave the belt up when it came time to give the belt up. And so I would get paid every 3 weeks from at the TV tapings from the previous 3 weeks of earnings.
Right.
And Vince Sr., this was in the Philadelphia Auditorium, the old arena rather, would take me into this back room with one light bulb overhead, with Phil Zacco sitting there with a book, and would cut me a paycheck, and I would begin to question about this town and that town, and of course they were skimming tremendous amounts of money from everyone, including me. And I would question Phil Zacco's accuracy as an accountant, and this was an issue. But I was certainly not going to make it a huge issue because I was making a very decent amount of money for that era. But that was the payoff for me every 3 weeks in a little room in that arena with one light bulb, with Phil Zbyszko and Vince Sr. sitting there.
Wow. Like a scene from a Cagney movie or something.
A scene, a real life
Yeah.
scene that would be hard to reproduce. Surreal.
Yeah.
Extremely surreal.
Vince Jr. on paper at this time is just doing the TV announcing, but everyone knows he's the boss's kid. How was he treated? What was his demeanor there? How was he?
I personally was fine with Vince Sr. I think everybody at the time, Vince Sr. was not pushy, didn't appear to be arrogant. His father was running the business. His father had the book. His father did the erasing, and his father told me, he said, Billy, when you have your address book, your personal address book, he says, always put everything in pencil so you can erase it. He says, he says, you can put the names of the person in ink, but their phone number in pencil, so you can erase it. And so he said it's not even a bad idea sometimes to put people's names in pencil because you never want to see them again. You know, and so that was words of wisdom from Vince Sr. And I saw him use that eraser in that book, that ledger that looked like maybe the tablets that Moses brought down from Mount Sinai. Okay? It was that holy book that held the names and the dates of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Okay? And it was like a holy book. And it was laid out on a table in the locker room. And to re-answer your question about Vince Jr., he was absolutely fine.
Was he liked by the other guys generally? Talent?
Yes, because there was no personal relationship with Vince. Vince Jr., other than doing the announcing, at one point, Senior gave him the city of Bangor, Maine, to become his to run.
That's right.
And I've seen Vince and had dinner with Vince many times in Bangor, Maine. And Vince coming into Bangor, Maine, the little bitty auditorium sitting on the hill, and we'd have lunch, have lobster in Bangor, Maine. And he would, and this dark arena, this old arena, and we would peer through the doors, the little windows, and watch the matches. And he would come back and forth into the locker room because it was his town. It was his town to run. And his father said, if you could make Bangor, Maine run, you can make it work. He said, I'll consider handing this thing over to you. But you got to prove yourself with Bangor, Maine. And at the time, Vince was a very nice person.
WWF had stopped having their tag team champions defend the tag titles for such a long stretch. Did it become an unpopular title?
Yes. Because there was so much emphasis on Bruno Sammartino.
Okay.
And then, of course, the reason why the main event, Bruno Sammartino versus whoever, became the third or fourth match on the card, which was an unusual situation,
Was it Pedro?
was because Pedro Morales was wrestling a dear friend of mine, Blackjack Mulligan, in Boston. And Blackjack was laying on the ring apron selling, and a Puerto Rican gentleman got up out of his chair, opened up a knife about this big, and cut him from his knee to his hip, and laid him wide open. No security, just ringside guy. They cut Blackjack Milligan to the bone and almost bled to death. And so that was the last match. So he got away.
Right.
So at that point they said, well, we have to protect. There's so much morales of the Puerto Ricans were so out of control that was the beginning of putting the main event on third or fourth, because they had to protect. The heat was so real.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning, and that was the reason for that change of putting, instead of the main event being last.
At the time, there's no IC belt yet. So you get your heavyweight.
Intercontinental.
Right, Intercontinental yet. That comes later, 79. And then they, like we said, they kind of phased the tag team title out for a while. This is just, again, to narrow the spotlight to Bruno. I just want to focus in on the answer. That was why, because Bruno had so much, they didn't need the help of ancillary belts like that.
Yeah, it did not draw.
Right, okay.
It was not a drawing item.
How about Baron Mikel Cicluna and Torquemada as people? Any?
Yes, wonderful. Baron Cicluna, one of my dearest friends. I remember. It's hard. Cicluna broke. Excuse me. Okay. I'll get my composure. Winter time, freezing. Syracuse, New York. Cicluna not having the money to buy a coat. I had just bought a $500 or $600 leather jacket, okay? Because I was champion, had some money. Cicluna broke. I apologize. It was heartbreaking. I took my jacket off and put it on him. See here, brother. Get warm. They were paying him nothing. First, second, third match, okay? So I literally took the jacket off my back and put it on this man and went to a sporting goods store and bought a jacket, you know. It's something that has always stayed with me. And my wife Valerie, I apologize, but it was such a human. This was human touch. This was no longer wrestling. This was human touch. This was like Bruce Springsteen, song, the human, human touch. This was humanity. This was a man who was real and who was being treated disrespectfully and not being paid for his earnings. And he needed a ride, and I put him in my car, gave him my jacket, and he said, Billy, I hate to do this to you, but brother, we got to get there because I'm the first match. And I said, we're going to get there on time, leaving somewhere to somewhere else. And so that episode of having to give a jacket to a man to keep him warm will always stay with me.
Bruno was champ in 77, after having been champ for so many years.
Yeah.
Were you at all taken with him, in awe of him?
Oh, respectful, yes. Oh, because his reputation preceded him. This was Bruno Sammartino. This was a man who was idolized. This was a man who was a gentleman, okay? This was a man who had maybe one glass of wine, was Italian dinner. This was not a drunkard.
Right.
This was not a man who did drugs. This was not a man who drank a case of beer every night. See, this was a man who was a god to Italian people. Okay, this was a man who was revered. Like I would be speaking about Terry Funk tomorrow night. This was an icon of a man. This was a decent human being, see, who was adored. And so there was no feeding of this guy's a druggie, this guy's this guy's that, of other. So his reputation preceded him as an outstanding citizen and a man to be admired and to be around.
And then once getting in there and being around his company so much, he lives up to that.
Yes.
Reputation.
Oh yeah. Immediately, you knew you were in the company of a man who was a cut above. A cut above. Okay, maybe not the greatest skilled wrestler, but that doesn't matter because it was show business, and that's what I perceived it to be from day one. But his reputation as being a gentleman preceded him, and he lived up to it.
Now Stasiak, who he's working with at this point, this is years from he was a brief transitional champion for Bruno there too, and they bring him back to work this program. What condition was he in at the time? Was he?
Who?
I'm sorry, Stasiak, in working with Bruno.
His physical condition?
Physical condition, and also his stature, I should say, with the other guys in the line.
Since I had missed his earlier stuff, he still had this, I think it was a thing called the heart punch, this devastating heart punch. And at the time I was there, he had a horrible hernia and had to wear this belt, this massive belt to keep his hernia from, his guts from spilling out. And so that hindered his ability to perform. But a very nice guy, and I did have some matches against Stasiak, and he would ask me to please mention the Croatian nation, because he's Croatian, legit. And he said, Billy, would you mind, while you're cutting your promo, to mention me being from Croatia, because I guess he had a lot of pride in this. And I said, well, of course. And I said, this guy is Croatian. These Croatians are the toughest people on the face of the earth, And so there was something about him and being a legitimate Croatian that he wanted me to transfer to the public watching this television show. And I never did quite figure it out, but I honored that.
Now, Backlund making his debut in '77. Backlund comes in, having come from, where is he at the time? Vern. I know Vern's one of the guys, Sam Muchnick and Eddie Graham, who kind of sold Vince on Bob.
Yes, and there is, until this day, which I don't believe, speculation, because Vince McMahon Vince Sr. told me, that Bob Backlund is going to be the next Bruno Sammartino, because he is the Midwestern, all-American boy, okay? And he will eventually become, since he is an all-American boy, and I do not understand how Vince bought this sale of goods, and the story is correct that you're quoting, that Vern Gagne, Sam Muchnick, and Eddie Graham convinced Senior to select Bob Backlund to become the next Bruno Sammartino. I believe it may be from Vern Gagne being a very wrestling-orientated person himself, but from Eddie Graham being so wise and knowledgeable and recognizing the show business aspect of the business, how an Eddie Graham could have seen the potential of a Bob Backlund being a household name to replace Bruno Sammartino. This I find suspect.
I was going to say, what's the impetus for this here, do you think?
Eddie Graham, I would eliminate from that equation. Sam Mushnick and Vern Gagne, yes. But I would eliminate, and I don't know what they were thinking, except maybe possibly Vern Gagne being such, I believe, Vern went to the Olympics, I believe.
Yeah,
as a
the
wrestler.
amateur background had
of
more
course.
credibility to
of
him
course.
than
Yeah, that mindset, even though Vern Gagne realized you had to have showbiz to draw the money. You were not going to draw your houses with technical wrestling with Billy Robinson and folks like this. You had to have your wild Indian Wahoo McDaniel,
Right.
okay, and you had to have the Baron von Raschke's with the iron claw, goose stepping across the ring. So Vern, in his wisdom, realized that it was not the pure wrestling that was going to, and did in fact sell out his buildings. So, but it could have came from Vern Gagne and Sam Mushnick being hardcore, old school, wrestling orientated.
We'll talk about this extensively. First off, the legs on the rope. For Bruno to save face, for people to just be furious at you.
No. Safe face would not be the word. Would not be the correct term.
Okay.
Cheating in front of the fans. This is old school terminology. Not the save face for Bruno. We would never beat Bruno in the middle of the ring to begin with because of his iconic status to switch the belt. Okay. To Vince Sr, knowing me being a heel, insisted on, and I also insisted on, somehow cheating to win this thing for Bruno Sammartino. To also honor the man and to put heat on the heel doing the honors, you see. So Vince said, both feet on the rope, for leverage. And I said, absolutely. And I'll put both feet on the top rope. I'll put them on the ceiling if I have to make this thing obvious. And that's what happened. Both feet on the rope for leverage.
Take me back to that night. What discussion, if any, is there between you and Bruno prior to going out to do this? It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. But Bruno was tired. Okay? Bruno was worn out. The hard rings, as I mentioned earlier, the boxing rings, had beaten him down physically. He was burnt out physically. He wanted to get this thing over with. Okay? It was just another night at the office. I sat down with Bruno in the locker room, and I said, brother, what do you want to do out there? This is your deal. What do you want to do? He said, well, Billy, we know the finish. You're going to put your feet on the ropes, and you're going to pin me. I said, well, also, I'm going to put a razor blade on my head and bleed for you. I'm going to bleed for you because this is a big deal, and you're a big deal. And to make this thing really have the look. And I bled so bad. I've got photographs. You look at some photographs of this event, and you will see women going like this because I had really bled like later years, and Eddie Guerrero bled almost to death in Los Angeles. If you go back about 4 or 5 years, when he did a deal on his head, and there was so much blood that they had to refuse to go to the hospital. They brought paramedics to give him a transfusion. You go back and look, and you'll see this self-massacre that he did, and he stayed out there, and he stayed out there in that ring and almost bled to death.
Do you know when you go too deep? Are you able to, or are you so tied up in the moment and the adrenaline that?
Not really. You just know that you know if there's enough blood or if there's not enough blood.
Okay.
That's what you know. That's what you know. And I knew that I had to produce a lot of blood for Bruno Sammartino as a tribute to him, to beat me down so bad. Now remember, this is an era when people lived and breathed this business, and they lived and breathed it that night. And I had bled so bad. I've got photographs, black and white photographs. The people were getting nauseated, and I was getting sick because I was losing too much blood. And when my feet hit that top rope, I scooped up Bruno and rolled him up, bleeding profusely. And the 3 count came down, and the reality set in with the fans. The guy running the lights forgot to turn the house lights on. The guy on the stage, Baltimore Civic Center, with in between matches, turn the house lights on. They just did that for some reason. Well, this guy's caught up in it. And when that thing happened, and my hand was raised, and they put that belt in my hand, fans closed in before the police could get there to protect me. I had to get out of that ring and use that belt like a helicopter. And I was kicked on, I was hit, I was spit on, big cups of beer thrown, kicked, cursed. It was like when it was final and the fans knew it really happened.
Right.
That my hand was raised and it was over, and I cheated like hell to get it, and I was beaten down to a pulp, and with the blood, and it was an obvious cheat, and I got away with it. This was real heat. That's heat. You see, that was real raw emotion because of them idolizing Bruno Sammartino. And the guy cheated, and the guy got away with it, man. And he stole the belt from Bruno. And it was hell getting out of that ring.
You must have seen at that point that
And
this would be a year of hell.
I did not. I did not even take a shower. I washed off. They had a cab waiting for me. Came back, had towels, washed off, threw my stuff, wrapped towels around me, and got in the cab and got out of the building. Because they were closing off the building.
Right.
They were coming after me.
What I was going to say was, leaving at that point and seeing the reaction, you must have begun to sense that you're going to have a year of hell as a
yes.
heel with a tremendous amount of heat, getting out of buildings.
Oh yes.
Being seen in public,
Yes,
challenged,
yes,
all that
yes.
shit.
Because Pedro Morales had already set the standard years before of the Puerto Ricans being so possessed and obsessed with Pedro Morales that this was real to these people in the Northeast. This was no game here. They lived and breathed it. So I knew, of course, what I was up for and into.
Did the other guys backstage know that the switch was going to happen? Was everybody kayfabe when there was going to be a title change, or did other workers know also?
Some did and some didn't. It was very surprising. I was surprised that some guys didn't know about it.
Okay.
The referee didn't know about it until he was told, and had no problem with it. But once, again, surprisingly, not all the wrestlers knew, but once they knew, well, of course, they all watched and got on that stage to watch that passing of the torch.
Yeah. Somebody, I don't have it in my notes, but if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody you smartened up that night who got some good photos. Is that
George
a true story?
Napolitano. Yes, my friend George. Yes, I told George, you come with me to Baltimore. I rode down there with George Napolitano, And I said, you get your camera and you get set up because it's going to happen tonight, George. So I made sure it was well documented. Well, also it was very well documented because for the first time ever, there are cameras and scaffolding set up to record this event in the building with Vince McMahon Jr. commentating. People walk in for the first time ever in the Baltimore Civic Center. Cameras are set up, videotape, on scaffolding with Vince McMahon commentating. And they knew something was up. I suppose they knew something was up. I don't know if they knew the actual thing was going to change hands.
Right.
But you've got
It's going to be a special night for one reason or the other.
Yeah.
I mean, Tony Bennett was going to show up to sing. In the title switch happens in Baltimore. Is this because if it happened in New York or Philly or Boston, you would have been murdered?
No, this was to surprise the fans. This was to sneak one in on the fans, and so the fans would not predict it, because it does happen in the Garden most of the time. This was a clever move by Vince Sr. to pull this thing off in Baltimore to surprise the fans. And the following Madison Square main event matches that were already pre-taped and in the can were me versus Gorilla Monsoon in a regular match, and Bruno Sammartino defending his title against someone, I can't remember, and I apologize for that. But that was the scheduled event for the next Madison Square Garden, with the change coming in April of 2 weeks before. And in those days, very little communication, as you know. Well, you're a young man, you may not know, but there was no internet, no cell phone, no nothing. Okay, and so as a result of this, when I came out in Madison Square Garden as the champion, there was a near riot, because this caught, and Gorilla Monsoon became my first opponent as champion, because this was the scheduled match.
Right.
A simple match between Gorilla Monsoon and Superstar Billy Graham all of a sudden became a championship match. And when I came out with that belt on that night, the real word pandemonium applied, because it freaked him out. Because again, there was very little communication.
Yeah.
You see? And so pandemonium did break loose when I walked out. It was disbelief. And there was actually confusion, because people didn't know that I'd already wrestled the guy in Baltimore. They didn't get it. They didn't, and of course they announced it that, well, ladies and gentlemen, 2 weeks ago, Superstar Billy Graham defeated Bruno Sammartino, and he is now the new champion, and this is a championship match. And so it was amazing to see and witness the almost dumbfounded disbelief of the fans of what they were witnessing.
I actually want to go to the TV tapings for a minute and talk about how they were done then at Philadelphia Arena and Hamburg, respectively, for Championship and All-Star Wrestling. The physical setup of the Philadelphia Arena: big building, small building.
Old school civic arena, wood bleachers.
Right.
I suppose wood folding chairs. I don't think there was even, maybe there might have been the metal chairs, but just your raw, old school setup with your cameras. Simple.
Was there ample locker room space for all you guys?
Not really, but we were all in one room. and a couple shower stalls. It's old school. And we had benches, and we had things to sit on, and
All you guys in the heels, baby faces,
Everyone in one
enhancement
room.
talent, everybody in one room.
in one room, and it was back a ways from the main auditorium, so the fans did not actually see us exit and enter the same locker room.
Okay, right.
They didn't see that.
Right. And I think in Hamburg it was curtained off anyway, right?
In Hamburg, it was separate locker rooms.
Oh, they were separate. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Separate locker rooms.
So how are things run in the tapings? Are you doing promos in the daytime and
Yes.
shooting the show at night?
Promos all day long.
Right.
Shooting the show at night, and then inserting the promos after the
As the tapes
as
bicycle.
they went around.
Probably top of the line catering, I would imagine, for you guys
Yeah.
sitting there all day long.
Gorilla Monsoon bringing in Dunkin' Donuts.
No.
And you would get maybe a Mel Phillips to run out and get hamburgers.
Oh, I didn't know where that was going to go. The Mel Phillips reference.
Yeah, that's
Go
far
anywhere.
enough. That went far enough.
Okay.
And that was the extent. It was Dunkin' Donuts, which unfortunately for Gorilla Monsoon increased his diabetic state, eating tons of donuts, but a Monsoon on the way in from Willingboro, New Jersey, I believe was his home, would stop at Dunkin' Donuts and get massive amounts, call ahead and have it prepared for
Really?
the boys.
With the enhancement talent, I always look to get the proper term. Were they called jobbers? Were they called enhancement talent? Were they called weekly guys, local guys? What do you call them in the day?
Jobbers.
Jobbers in the day, job. Okay.
Yeah, you do a job. You're a job.
How much discussion is there with them before you go out and do a 2-minute or a minute and a half match, if at all?
There was discussion. Here's the finish, and I'm gonna beat you to a pulp. You know, and they knew that,
Yeah.
and it was very obvious that they were jobbers. You go back and look in the archives of the photographs of some of my opponents, and they were just kids, just who were starting, and who were happy and thrilled to do a job.
Right.
Do a job. And it was very, very raw, in your face, I'm just gonna beat you to a pulp, and you're gonna do a job for me.
Were they treated well backstage in the locker room?
I
Yeah,
treated them
guys?
very well personally, because without the jobbers, who are you going to wrestle? And ironically, I will throw this in, that Hogan, as he went on to his career, began to isolate himself in '87 and demand and receive his own private locker room, and would not acknowledge the jobbers. And I saw this, I witnessed this myself,
Right.
very disrespectful to the jobbers, and I gave jobbers rides. I hung out with Johnny Rods and Pete Sanchez, and those guys gave me rides. I was not a respecter of person. These kids were doing a job. If this kid didn't do a job for me, you're out of business.
Yeah.
So I saw the value and the necessity of a job guy, and I saw his importance. And you better damn well treat the guy with respect, because he's a human being, and he's there to put you over, and you better shake his damn hand and thank him when the deal is over, which I did.
Was it Monsoon running the tapings at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
He's giving you the finishes, times, stuff like that?
Yes. One occasion in Hamburg, I'm wrestling with Kurt Hennig, the kid Kurt Hennig, passed away. Going a little bit too long, Monsoon walks down to the ring.
I heard this.
You heard the story?
I didn't know it was you, though. And screams, go home?
He has his tablet, the matches, and he goes like this.
Oh, that was.
Let's get it over with. Kind of walks right up there on camera, right to the ring. Let's go home. Finish in front of all hands. It was me and Kurt Hennig that happened.
That's funny.
To.
Somebody recalled that, I think, in a book.
True story.
Where,
it was me.
He had to come to ringside because
I was wrestling too long. Kurt Hennig.
Gary Capetta was your announcer at the time. Thoughts on him?
Yes, very nice guy. Very nice guy. Did a very good job. Very energetic.
Were they smartened up at all, ring announcers, or?
I'm sure they were to an extent. I'm sure they were. I don't recall any special protecting them from.
For the record, the Philadelphia arena was destroyed by an arson on August 24th, 1983.
Really?
Yeah. How were Muchnick and Vince Sr.?
Oh, they were very well connected. Very. Everybody worked together.
Yeah.
Now, I was the first WWWF champion to defend the title outside of the Northeast Territory. And Vince Sr., for some reason, decided to do this. And so I did defend the title in places like St. Louis. And Vince sent me on a 1-week tour of cities in Kansas. And one of my title defenses was against the Black Angus. Now you have to go back and look up the Black Angus. Long beard, long hair, a wild type guy. And I said, Vince, I do not understand the reasoning of why we are sending me to Kansas, where they do not like the fans or the wrestlers, do not appreciate the WWF. 3 W's, because the Japanese wrestling fans would ask for your autograph and they'd say, 3WF champion. Can I please have your autograph? 3WF champion. 3WF champion.
How about Dick the Bruiser?
Disgustingly egotistical, to the point of revolting, and refused to sell 1 iota, and I had told him so to his face, that I don't appreciate you and your attitude, and I have to wrestle you, but I don't like you. And that was one of the very few people that I actually had to tell that to. I also had to I'm sorry, this is a very important.
Oh, roll.
I also had to tell Billy Robinson. In Minneapolis, Vern Gagne was getting ready to shoot a big angle. It was either Wahoo McDaniel with the Indian strap match or Billy Robinson against me to shoot an angle and to do some real business in the territory. And Vern Gagne brings me in the office and he says, we're going to do this deal. And he says, do you have any preferences? And I says, yes, I do, as a matter of fact, because I said, I will not do this angle with Billy Robinson, because when I broke in Stu Hart's territory in 70, Billy Robinson was wrestling in the territory, and Billy Robinson did not care for football players or bodybuilders, and he made it known that he didn't care for us. And I never appreciated his attitude whatsoever, and I told Vern that, and it was amazing because it was not my personality, but I just told Vern that if you really want to do some business, we do it with an Indian who has a strap, who eventually have a strap match with. And you have an Indian who is on fire, as opposed to a technical wrestler who I have no business in the ring with. Wahoo and I can kick the crap out of each other and entertain the folks. And the first time I had to wrestle Billy Robinson at a show, a house show, down the line, I sat down with him, and he was very famous for hurting people, because he was a legitimate wrestler. He could hurt you. And he had hurt people in Calgary, and I knew he didn't like me. So before our match, probably, I know for a fact it was in Illinois, it was either Springfield or Rockford, Illinois, one of those towns. I sat down with Billy Robinson, and in front of him before our match, I pulled out a razor blade, and I taped it to my finger. And I had about that much razor blade showing. I said, Billy, if you try to hurt me, because I know you can wrestle, I said, if you have any thought, and if I feel you even attempting to hurt me, I will proceed to cut you from one end of your body to the other. And he turned white as a sheet, of course, because I put the razor blade on my finger right in front of him. I said, you see this razor blade? I said, you may have me tied up in knots, but I can reach. And I'll start cutting, and I'll cut your eyes out. Because I don't like you. And nobody likes you. And you've hurt a lot of people, and you will not hurt me. Well, obviously, when we wrestled, I didn't even know he was in the ring. He was so gentle. Obviously. And so, but that had to be done. I had to make a stand. Because he would have, he would have maybe tried to slip one in on me, just to prove that he was Billy Robinson, that he could hurt you. You see, and no one liked Billy Robinson because of that attitude. But
Bruiser, though, he wasn't somebody who would take advantage of you.
He was somebody who just had an egotistical, rude, in your face, demeaning you, and just he abused Bobby Heenan to the point that it was probably law breaking the way he abused Bobby Heenan. So I had a real issue, and maybe Dick the Bruiser would drop down to one knee to sell for you, maybe. Yes, very nice gentleman, and who had a fetish for cutting his head, and who had rows of furrows like Abdullah the Butcher, my dear precious friend, who took me under his wing in Calgary when I broke in, and we bonded in Calgary. Loved the guy to death. We always loved each other. And Joe LeDuc had this fetish of, some of those guys did in those days, of cutting their heads with these razor blades and having rows of scar tissue that they wore as a badge of honor for some reason. And we did a little bit of business, and he was very cooperative in the ring and was happy to do what we had to do.
The logic of going out of town for that match, is it because they wanted to see you two together and didn't want the New York audience to see you together yet because of what was coming?
Possible. I never even asked, but I assume that they wanted me to have just some sort of a feel for us together before we actually performed.
Makes sense.
Yeah, just to get a feel. But I didn't enjoy. I enjoyed wrestling in the Kiel Auditorium because the fans were very upbeat, but I didn't enjoy the atmosphere of the NWA jealousy, maybe, or something.
So when you would get down there was a palpable feeling of tension?
Not with Hardy Race. We were very, very close friends, and remain very close friends. Not with some of the other guys, but as a whole, the general population of wrestlers in the NWA did not appreciate the WWE, WWF champion coming into their hometown and performing. And personally, I didn't see the wisdom in it either. Right. I don't know what Vince Sr. was thinking about, except being gracious, thinking that I would help draw, which I did not. Help draw in the Midwest. It was not a big deal. And the fans didn't even.
So you didn't drop the tag strap before going to New York, so I guess they needed to do something to clean that up.
They had to settle that matter.
Right.
Yes, they had to settle that matter.
How about the Briscoes?
Jerry Briscoe, wonderful, wonderful guy. Briscoes were always nice to me. Gentlemen, absolutely gentlemen. Jack Briscoe made a comment to me in this nightclub where I met Hulk. He said, "Superstar, I'm so handsome." He said, "If I had your body with my face, I could have any woman on the face of the earth." I said, "Well, you got them all anyway because you're a handsome guy." So that was kind of a remarkable statement, you know. Okay, Jack, there's a little bit of an ego there. Yeah. I'm so handsome that if I had your face, I could have
maybe a couple of cocktails.
Ken Patera was extremely strong physically. He was the first American to put 500 pounds over his head in clean and jerk, legit, the first American. So he had this enormous natural strength, and he tossed me around like a toy. I literally felt like I was a toy in his hands, not hurting me, you know. But you could just feel his enormous strength, even though we were trying to work, but just, you know, in the process of bumping off of him and being around him and him picking me up and moving me around, it was like effortless for this man. Oh, horrible, horrible, horrible. And I told Vince Sr. that I don't want this match. This is Haystack Calhoun. This is someone who does not. What year?
Still 77. Still 77.
Was that champion?
Champion. This is your title run.
Okay, and I said I don't see the wisdom in this. And I think it's a mistake, and it was a horrible match, obviously. And so after that very horrible match, I had to wrestle Haystack Calhoun in Nassau Coliseum a little later on, and convinced Vince to make it a 30-second match. Once we were introduced, Haystack took off his horseshoe and turned his back to set it on the turnbuckle where he kept it, the post. Yeah. I attacked him, boom, knocked him out of the ring and counted him out.
I take it you
30-second match.
backbreaker didn't happen that night?
It didn't happen that night. Yes, Dominic DeNucci, wonderful guy. I and Dominic DeNucci set the record in Madison Square Garden for the fastest match, a 9-second match in Madison Square Garden. My first match in Madison Square Garden.
Really? Okay.
Was against Dominic DeNucci. The bell rings, I attacked him, hit him, boom. He bounced off the turnbuckle, came back, I rolled him up. A 9-second match in Madison Square Garden. My first appearance in Madison Square Garden.
DeNucci won a battle royal that night in Pittsburgh. What are your opinions on battle royals? Is it something you enjoyed working, or was it?
It was a unique, kind of a fun thing. Yeah, it was a kind of you had to be very careful because there were so many guys in the ring and stumbling over you and falling on you,
Yeah.
and things like that. But it was a unique, fun thing that I kind of enjoyed.
Carlos Rocha, Portuguese champion. Guess it made that much of an impression on you, the Portuguese champion, and his talents that he brought to the ring.
And what year was this?
77. I was going to ask you, is there really a Portuguese champion, and what the hell is he doing in Rhode Island? But
Well, there was a Portuguese community in Rhode Island.
Okay.
Oh, yes, a large Portuguese community. Yeah, so I think they tried to tap into it.
okay, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
CWF.
Was that a championship match? It couldn't have been.
Well, it says. Well, I don't know. When they would bring other champs in, they didn't do title for title, so it was probably.
Oh no, there were no other champs being brought in.
Oh, what the hell was the Portuguese?
Are you sure that was the correct name?
We're
There were
never wrong.
Salvador.
Yes, we get a. Okay.
That was the name?
Yeah. Okay. Portuguese people's champion, maybe. Who knows? Crazy hot crowd, New York City. Bruno coming back now to try and
Yes.
get the strap.
Yes.
Talk about that. Now, you knew you must have been in for
Yes.
a hell of a night.
Interestingly, Dave Meltzer, the wrestling journalist, very, very good friend of mine, while doing research on matches in Madison Square Garden, main event matches in Madison Square Garden some years ago, ran across the fact that I had the highest percentage of sellouts as a main event attraction in Madison Square Garden than any other performer. Not the most sellouts, because I wasn't the champion the longest.
Longest, gotcha.
And then Backlund Morales for 3 years. But the highest percentage, which was 20 out of 21 sellouts of main events. And the only one that did not sell out, and that Vince Sr. told me would not sell out, still drew 20,000 people, was against Peter Maivia, the High Chief, with the tattoos.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you think so, Vince? And we did everything. We had Peter eating raw lobsters, and I mean, because I love this guy, I wanted this thing to work. Well, 20,000 people is not a bad house, brother. And Vince said, because they will not believe that a Samoan with tattoos from here to here will be the next champion. But 20,000 showed up to watch the show anyway. So in the process, I find out that I have the highest percentage of sellouts of main event matches in Madison Square Garden history for pro wrestling.
And this one in particular, this is the first rematch with Bruno in New York after they learned that you're the champ. So are any precautions taken for you in the build to get you out quick, or to extra police, anything?
No, because you were on earlier now. This
Right.
was you were on the third or fourth match.
Right.
And so immediately after the match, they would send another match right into the ring immediately to keep the fans' attention and focus on the ring so they wouldn't be dispersing and getting ideas of
Gotcha.
going after you and so forth. So it was very safe. You have your match, you do your deal, you go downstairs, you jump outside, you catch a cab, and you're out of there. So there were no real threats of physical harm. Tony Garea, very nice guy, and has always thanked me to this day for having the little run I had with him.
Mm-hmm.
I wrestled him quite a bit in the smaller towns, and I always told him that you better be thanking God above for wrestling me because I made you. I enhanced your career. And I had a lot of fun with Tony Garea, very willing opponent, and in these little New Jersey towns and different places,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a chance to act foolish and grab garbage cans and throw them into the ring,
Right.
and plastic garbage and stuff like that. So always I had reminded Tony that I was the one who really enhanced her career.
Since retiring, he became a pretty prominent road agent.
Yes.
And one of Vince's main men. A good choice for this job, would you say?
Very dedicated. Very dedicated to the McMahon business and very intelligent and years of experience. So, sure.
And we're talking about the Spectrum here, so this is, again, Phil Zacco territory, right?
Yeah. Which is just purely a front, Phil Zacco territory, but Vince McMahon.
I meant under his promotion. He was the one sending the flyers out and putting the ads in the papers.
Yes, correct.
Right?
And also Baltimore.
Okay.
And Phil Zacco, in his wisdom, while I was champion, on a very hard ring that took his toll on Bruno Sammartino, I've been talking about earlier, in Albany, New York. I was wrestling Billy Whitewolf, and on a boxing ring, and I go down to one knee, take a little bit of a bump, and my knee sticks, my body turns and my knee doesn't, and so I tear out I tear some tendons, and I'm hurt. So I have to take, I have to go, that night I drive back down to Philadelphia, and I wake up about 4 in the morning, and my knee is this big, and there's red streaks going up my thigh, and I have an infection because I had opened up some skin and dirt.
From the mat?
Yes, for the mat, yes. That was never clean. Had entered my body, and I had an infection, and I had a huge fever. And I drove myself to the Chester, Pennsylvania hospital right outside of Philadelphia. And they took one look at my knee and said, well, we got to admit you immediately into the hospital and get some IVs in here and get this thing. And so they ended up cutting my knee open to suck out all of the poison, okay? And then sew me back together. So I was actually out for almost over 3 weeks. And during that period of time, there was a return match in Baltimore against me and Bruno. Vince Sr. wanted to wait until the fans were in the building to announce that I was hurt and would not show up. So, and Phil Zacco, in his wisdom, said, no, I am going to put up posters. I'm going to alert the fans as they enter to buy their tickets. The superstar Billy Graham is seriously hurt and will not be here tonight. In his wisdom as a promoter. Vince McMahon Sr. is begging me to fly from Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm recuperating, to at least show up in Baltimore and put me on a gurney and roll me to the ring after beating Bruno in this very building as my second return match. He said, Billy, will you just let me put you on a gurney? I was, oh, sure, I'll let you put me on a gurney and pull and push me to the ring to make an announcement that I'm unable to wrestle Bruno Sammartino and get stabbed 100 times in the process.
Has there been a worse decision to make your heavyweight champion look like the indestructible heel than that? I don't know. Send in your letters. We'll find out.
That is a classic.
Wow.
This is a true story. Put me on a gurney. He said, will you let me put you on a gurney?
That should have been the title of your book. Put me on a gurney.
Yeah, that's a book. And I said, of course not.
I want to talk about those characters for a minute. Let's take the animal first.
George Animal Steel. One of the greatest gimmicks, the easiest thing to do, act goofy and act like you're out of your mind. And I've talked to George the Animal Steel about this, and he said it was absolutely like handing you money for doing nothing. You know, just walking around and acting goofy, you know, and taking a few bumps and getting a huge paycheck. And so it was one of the easiest gimmicks ever that was successful. And he also, as you may know, was a amateur wrestling coach in, I believe, maybe Detroit, Michigan. Yeah. And he had gotten a lot of bad ink because him being a professional wrestler and being a coach at the same time, the family members of the opposing wrestlers' parents felt that it was unjustly so, because you had a professional wrestler coaching amateur wrestlers, and so they fought hard to get him out of that position.
Scarpa.
Joe Scarpa.
Yeah.
Very jealous of me, very because I had a history of not showing up until the matches had already started, and in that era, you could come in late, you know. And I did not personally enjoy hanging around a locker room. I did not enjoy the talk of wrestling. I did not enjoy the idle conversations about. I did not enjoy hanging out in a locker room. So I had a history of all, and I would, and even in the garden, Madison Square Garden, I would have Ivan Koloff tell Vince Sr. that I was in Mid-City Gym training, and that I would be at the Garden at 8 o'clock. And I'd be working out, and the match would start at 8 o'clock. Not the fear, but I'm gonna be training, and so I had a history of appearing late. Mm-hmm. Always appearing, never a no-show, being there. And so the Indian Strongbow kind of detested this. I think he interpreted it as some sort of an ego trip, which it was not. I just simply didn't enjoy hanging around wrestlers and talking idle talk.
And he was vocal about this, that you were late?
Yeah, he was. You could feel it. You could feel the tension. You could cut it with a knife. He didn't appreciate because he was old school, hardcore. Get to that ring 2 hours early, you know, and so I never really cared for the gentleman. And also, I'm sorry. Also, the matches were difficult with him because he would try to, you know, if we had a 12-minute match, he would turn it into a 22-minute match, you see, and he would purposely, and he would try to, I don't know, physically wear me out or something, and so there was real tension.
Did you work Puerto Rico ever?
A little bit, yes.
How did you find that to be?
Disturbing, dangerous, rock throwing, knife cutting. Not a good place to go. Oh, well, you have two charismatic people here. I, of course, am still the heel. Love Jimmy Valiant to this day. Precious man, precious man. Another man with natural charisma. Charismatic. So charismatic. And didn't have to work at it. Did not have to work at being charismatic because he was naturally charismatic. And so we actually worked so well together, but me being a heel, of course I had to hold back on wanting to be a babyface. And so our matches were just like dream matches because of his charisma and his ability to not hurt you and to be very gentle with you. Yes, Rocky Johnson. When I started wrestling after Calgary, 71 in Los Angeles, I wrestled against Rocky Johnson several times. Traveled with him. One particular match down in San Diego, I'm wrestling Rocky Johnson. I'm selling on the edge of the apron. And Rocky Johnson and I worked very well together. He's very, very accommodating, selling and everything. And so I was selling for Rocky Johnson on the apron, and a man proceeds to get out of his chair and come over and hit me and split me wide open as I'm laying there selling, not seeing him coming, a fan in raging, and punched me and split me wide open. And so I go after the fan and retaliate, and then I go and get about 6 stitches with my eye. But Rocky Johnson was always accommodating in our matches, and always very nice, and was a bodybuilder, had a great physique, and so we shared the bodybuilding aspect of our careers as well.
Joe Walcott, the special guest referee. Why are they doing this?
In Puerto Rico?
Yes.
I don't know, but speaking of boxers being referees,
Yeah.
Archie Moore was a special guest referee in a match in San Francisco in 1972 in Reno, Nevada, where I wrestled Terrible Ted, the wrestling bear.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I did. On my last week in the territory, 1 year, which was a unbelievable year of my life, being tag team partners with Pat Patterson, and so what was the question?
Why the hell is Andre the Giant in a boxing match of any kind?
But there was another point I was leading to also.
The referee,
Yes, Archie Moore in San Francisco was a special guest referee in a match of Pat Patterson against Ray Stevens. Archie Moore we're sitting there talking, and I'll tell you also about Joe Frazier being a special wrestling referee in the Carolinas, sitting next to me, talking to me, and sniffing pure alcohol, rubbing alcohol to clear his sinuses. Superstar, this is the greatest thing to clear your sinuses, rubbing alcohol. Okay, Joe, wonderful guy.
Yeah.
Archie Moore tells us, he knows all about this business. He tells us that professional boxers, when it's time to stop a match because of blood, in the corner man would cut. That's why the boxers have these slice-looking marks. They would cut the razor blade in the corner and immediately seal it, and put Vaseline over it. And so the next round, when it came, ping, opened you up, stopped the match because of blood. He told us that story.
Wow.
Archie Moore. Came right from Archie Moore. Yes, that was trying to get Peter over for our match in the garden, and breaking the ukulele and running, scraping his forehead, and he gets the blood, doing everything to make this thing work.
Build that matchup.
Build the matchup. Yeah, and like I said, they went and got a raw lobster, and he ate the raw lobster, and we smashed the little ukulele deal, and we did everything. And Vince, in his wisdom, said it will not sell out, but still, 20,000 people is not a bad night at the office.
Dusty Rhodes.
Yes, followed by the famous Bull Rope match.
You talk about charisma, there's another guy.
So much charisma, almost too much charisma for two people to interact with, because you have so much charisma. Who's the most entertaining? And now Dusty Rhodes is bringing out the charisma, and me, my love for Dusty Rhodes, and his natural charisma, and my natural charisma wanting to be a real baby face, which I was at heart, and should have been later transferred into the baby face role. It was almost too much. One superstar Billy Graham on a card, one American Dream Dusty Rhodes is enough. You don't want a card full of superstar Billy Grahams or American Dreams Dusty Rhodes. So obviously, this was just a natural sellout situation, because at the time, as we were talking at lunch, the tapes were going back and forth from Florida to New York and New York to Florida. So it was a natural Dusty. They already knew about Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah. And
And when he comes in and cuts these crazy promos, well, you fall in love with the guy. And so it is automatic sellout. Now, here's the deal. After this death match thing, we come back in the locker room. Dusty Rhodes tells Vince McMahon Sr., there's one more match left, Vince. The death match isn't the end of this thing. It's called the Bull Rope match. And Vince says, really? What's that all about? So right there in the locker room, right there after the match, still bleeding, we get Vince McMahon, and Dusty says to Vince, the bull rope, the cowbell, the cowbell deal. He says, that's the match, that's the deal, have the cowbell. We're both tied to each other, and there's a cowbell. in between us, and he talked Vince into that night on that spot to do it, and he went out and announced the next main event will be the cowbell bull rope match, and it sold out overnight. Yeah, very nice guy, but nothing really special. I did suggest to Larry Zbyszko, and it was kind of funny because he always reminded me of this, of doing something very unusual in the match, and I said I will take responsibility of this, cutting you up with getting blood on you, or doing something to really make this thing work. And so it was always kind of an inside joke that I would take responsibility for the heat from Vince. It's my idea. You don't have to get in trouble for doing this thing. But there was never anything really special with me and Larry, but of course with Bruno.
Yeah, sure.
And Larry, well, then you had your magic. Pedro Morales was famous for this stomach shot, which hurt, we had our match, had a good match. I see this crazy stomach shot coming, and I protect myself with my forearms here to help absorb the blow. Mm-hmm. Well, and Pedro feels that I didn't sell this enough, and was taken aback by it, and we had a little oral altercation in the locker room afterwards. And I said, Pedro, you got to realize you hurt people with this punch. You really hit people hard in the stomach with this thing. And I said, I didn't feel like getting hit, and maybe getting an internal injury, And I said, I sold for you, I did the best I could for you. But he said, amigo, you didn't sell my punch to the stomach. I said, I'm not going to sell it because it hurts. It hurts too much to sell. So, other than that, it was enjoyable. Another natural Polish power, ethnic connection, Northeast. Mm-hmm. That was the secret. Having a match, I'll get to your Boston match, having a match in Binghamton, New York with Ivan Putski. I'll show you how it has changed. I suggest to Ivan, when you go out there, before me, that since you're Polish power and you're Dobra and everybody loves you, have a fan hand you a cup of beer, drink a little beer. Well, we have Stone Austin, Stone Cold drinking tons of beer in the ring. Well, at the time when this story got back to Vince Sr, that Ivan Putski actually took a few swallows of beer in the ring. It was like hell had just erupted, and Vince lost it because he felt this was like a
babyface,
a babyface, but he felt like it was not respecting or sacrilegious or something to drink a beer, Polish power, a couple squigs out of a cup of beer. But it was an incredibly easy and natural, because he was so over as a babyface that it was just automatic sellouts and stuff like that.
Take me to steel cage matches for a minute. And did you find them any more difficult or less so to work, or is it just another night at the office?
An easy thing to do. Whoever gets out of the steel cage wins, and the steel cage match with Bruno Sammartino 2 days before I relinquished the title to Bob Backlund in Madison Square Garden. This is Philadelphia Spectrum, steel cage match. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they had already had 5,000 people trying to get into a sold-out building. Set the all-time record for the Philadelphia Spectrum, 21,000 people.
That night?
Yes, that night. Saturday night. The night before was Friday in Pittsburgh.
Pedro.
Still cage match with Ivan Putski. Sellout. Turn people away. Saturday night, Philadelphia Spectrum. Estimated eventually about 10,000 people turned away, wanted to see this thing. And Bruno Sammartino was really unaware that the following Monday, just days away, I was going to give this belt to this kid. And when I told him that, he freaked out. I don't know how he missed it, seeing the build-up with Backlund, but at this time he was staying away a lot and just a few, I think he knew it was coming, but the reality of it. And I said, Bruno, the steel cage match, the first guy out of the cage, the door, is the winner, wins the match. And the finish was Bruno Sammartino is beating the crap out of me, and I'm over by the door, and so he runs across the ring, gives me this huge kick in the chest, and knocks me out of the cage through the door onto the floor, so I'm the winner. But I said, Bruno, I suggest, it's almost happened. You know what I'm going to say?
Yes, I do.
What am I going to say?
I was going to ask you later. You said, why don't you go out of the cage and save the company for Monday night?
Yes, I said, Bruno, I think it would be wise for you to work our way over to the edge of the ring, and for me to knock you out of the ring, and you regain the championship. And he said, you know what? He said, that's not a bad idea. We were that close from double-crossing Vince Sr. and Bob Backlund, within a hair of pulling that thing off.
What made you not do it?
Bruno did it. Bruno made that decision. I was all for it. It was my idea.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruno, in his being ethical,
Yeah.
did not want to do it. But he considered it. We talked about it. We discussed it. We considered it. I said, as far as I'm concerned, they're making a huge mistake of monumental proportions. And I said, I think we can pull this thing off. It's very simple. The first guy out of the cage wins the match, and it might as well be you, and you regain the title, and then it's a nightmare for Vince McMahon and this kid.
Did Bruno at least agree with you on the choice of Backlund?
Well, yes, he was mystified by it. He was dismayed by it.
Speaking of not selling, you wrestled
No
no mask.
maskers. Yes, 2 in a row.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, but why don't you just take no maskers first?
Prima donna refuses to sell. Refuses to. First of all, there's a problem with the man wearing a mask because you cannot see any pain etched on his face. How can a man sell with no expression? And that was my strong card, was expression of the facial features of please don't hit me, oh, my pain, it's the features, it's your face that conveys the message. Well, you have a man wearing a mask, and how are the fans going to know that this man is physically hurt when he cannot show any pain on his face? And the Mexican guys in Los Angeles, who actually cut their heads with a razor blade while wearing a mask, a white mask, and they would cut their heads and they poke a razor blade in their head, and they would get a blood spot on the mask, which was totally insane. And so it was the two matches with maskers obviously sold out because he was very popular. Sold out immediately, obviously, but they were horrible matches. And of course, I went out of my way to sell and to try to give some real credibility to the match.
What do you discuss with him beforehand? I mean, is it just known that nobody pins Mill and that's the end of it, or do you have to negotiate that in some way backstage?
No. It's I had wrestled him before, early in my career in '71 in Los Angeles, and so, and a few other times along the way. So we knew each other, and I liked Mil Mascaras. He was a very nice man. He just had a real problem with not selling. So there's really nothing to discuss. The basics of the match and how we would work our way through the match and the finish. And that was it.
During this match, the Grand Wizard is holding up tarot cards. I don't know if you remember this.
I do.
Was it to call spots because of a language problem, you and Mill? Or is it just some crazy gimmick he came up with to wave tarot cards around?
It was something that Vince Sr. came up with.
Okay.
Some sort of a communication between me and the Grand Wizard to get to Mil Mascaras, some sort of a code that Vince came up with. And I said, Vince, we don't really need to do this. Foolish. This was actually something that would be seen in the future, almost that we're seeing today, some sort of stupid codes and funny things of that nature. But Vince Sr. actually came up with this idea of the Grand Wizard flashing a card, a code. Remember that? A code, a number or something that would transmit a message to me to perform a certain move.
Very mystical.
Very
Mystical, no one
unusual.
understands it.
Yeah, they didn't understand it, and it made no sense, and it was totally unnecessary.
That same night, in what must have been a barn burner of a match, Arnold Skolin defeats Lou Albano.
Oh my God.
Via count out at 4 minutes and 35 seconds when Lou simply leaves the ring.
So
for
what
no
do
reason.
you want me to say about that?
I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up.
I will say this about Captain Lou Albano that caused a nightmare for Vince Sr. Of course, Captain Lou was a very beloved man. Loved Bruno. Just adored Bruno. And it was Captain Lou's job to go out, whoever Bruno was going to work with as champion, to go out and incite the crowd, and Captain Lou, in the process of doing this, would get blood for Bruno, just for Bruno. So in Madison Square Garden, and Captain Lou told me all this cheek cutting stuff. He told me how that happened. He said it was an accident. One time I missed my forehead. And I cut my cheek. So he said, well, I'll just keep on cutting my cheeks. So this night in the garden, and Captain Lou did do a little bit of drinking. I was a drug addict at one time. He never wore a coat in the winter because he was always so warm from the alcohol. This is a true story. Kept him warm. Never wore a coat. Always had the little Hawaiian shirt on, stuff like that. So Captain Lou in Madison Square Garden goes out to do the deal for Bruno, to get the thing up. He proceeds to do all of this stuff to his face with some sort of a pocket knife. And Captain Lou drops that pocket knife in the middle of the ring in Madison Square Garden and leaves it there. And leaves the ring, and there's his pocket knife laying in the middle of the ring. And he comes back in the locker, and Vince Sr. is watching every match. And Vince Sr. sees this pocket knife, not a little razor blade, but some sort of a knife that Captain Lou has just done this to, and drops it. And here is this knife laying in the middle of the ring in Madison Square Garden with athletic commissioners sitting around there. When Captain Lou hits the locker room, comes back to the locker room, Vince McMahon, and I'm standing right next to him, is having a heart attack and saying, Lou, I mean, this is a shoot.
Yeah.
Lou, my God, Lou, this is the garden. Lou, this is the garden.
Right.
What are you doing? You know, you can go ahead and cut your, do what you want to do, but this pocket knife, he said, Lou, this is the garden. I can't lose the garden, okay? He is in a state of shock, Vince McMahon Sr. And of course, Lou Albano is out there somewhere and bleeding profusely and very intoxicated, and they just say, well, I dropped it, and I'm sorry about that. And there lies in the ring until the referee goes over and gets a pocket knife. I think they were trying to tap into the Hispanic market, Puerto Rican market. I don't think it went very far.
Actually went 3 days because he drops it to Tatsumi Fujinami in the Garden, an 11-minute match. What agreements did Vince have with Japan at the time?
Vince was working very closely with Japan, Inoki.
Mm-hmm.
Vince, while I'm champion, says, Billy, I want you to go to Japan for a week or 10 days for Inoki. And I said, Vince, I don't want to go to Japan. I said, I don't like Japan. I don't want to travel halfway around the world. I said, I would really rather not go to Japan to do this deal. And again, he says, Billy, do it for me. Please, just do it for me. Well, of course, I go to Japan for that week, and of course the Japanese fans being very idolizing Inoki and those folks. So it was very, of course, very rewarding in that regards.
Two out of three fall match. But talk to me about Harley first. You told me he was a beloved friend of yours. So.
Yes. Incredible wrestler, and had wrestled Harley previously. And Harley was such a professional. And I thought I was a halfway decent professional, but Harley was so far above me, a cut above as far as professionalism in the ring. He would actually talk to me and say, Billy, slow down a little bit. You know, you're going a little too fast. And now I'm already superstar Billy Graham here. You know, and Harley was so wise and such a ring general, and had everything under his control, that he would actually talk to me and consult me during the match, and I listened. And I listened to him, and I argued strongly against a 60-minute match in the Orange Bowl. I said there's no reason, just because the NWA wrestled 60 minutes. That is no reason. We do not have to wrestle 60 minutes at the Orange Bowl to pull this thing off. We don't need to. We can wrestle 35 minutes, without a problem, but it's not necessary. And I pleaded my case in front of Harley, Eddie Graham, and Vince McMahon Sr. I said, it's just not necessary. I can do it, physically do it. Harley can carry me if he had to, for God's sakes, for 2 days. But I said, the fans don't need to sit there for an hour and watch us wrestle.
You did go to a time limit.
Oh, well, we went the time limit, yeah, with Gorilla Monsoon as a special guest referee. And of course, we're in the Orange Bowl, and it's raining. And the mat is slippery, and we're sliding, and we're slipping all over the place. Another reason not to go for a full hour.
Talk to me about the LA crowds, very Latino-centric and very impassioned by Chavo.
Yes, dearly loved Guerreros. And Chavo and I very, very close from day one. And we just had a lot of fun. And he was very willing to sell and to participate and to make the thing work. No jealousy of the WWF and the NWA with him. None of that business. Very excited about the match. Very thrilled to be doing the match. And they wanted me to I think it was Stopped on Blood. Did you
Blood, yeah.
It was Stopped on Blood, yeah. And so it was very enjoyable, and that was, of course, the beginning of my relationship with the Guerrero family.
Let's talk about the rope in this match, like we did for the Bruno match.
Vince's idea. He said, you want it with your foot on the rope, and I give Vince McMahon Sr. credit for this. You want it with your foot on the rope, and let's let you lose it with your foot on the rope to keep me viable, okay? What happens? The real story is the return match. I do the match. I lose the match for Bobby. All agreed upon. Happy to do it. The story is the return match. Me and Bob Backlund. And Bob Backlund, if you go back and look at photographs in the archives, wore a long boxing robe type deal. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wears the boxing robe with a towel around the neck. That look. The return match, he is now champion. He has the belt on, and he has the boxing robe over the belt, covered up. Okay, with the towel around the neck. We're in the hallway, getting ready to go to the ring, and Vince Sr. says, Bobby, the belt. It's about the belt. He says, where's the belt? I said, well, the belt's underneath my robe. He says, Bobby, you gotta show the fans the belt. He's got the belt, he's got the black robe, full length boxing robe, tied in a knot. The deal, that's his deal, okay? And Senior is pleading with this kid to at least take that robe off and walk out there with this belt, man. Show these fans this belt. And Bob Backlund quote to Vince about his robe. He said, but Vince, I like my robe. I like my robe, Vince. And here is your champion, who is concealing the most important, iconic item in wrestling at that time, the WWF belt, underneath a robe, and refuses to take that robe off because he tells Vince, I like my robe. Like a child.
Something childlike.
It was childlike. It was childlike. And Vince Sr. begged Dusty and myself, asked us and begged us, is there any way you can get some charisma into this kid? Ask us both.
What did you say to him?
You can't manufacture charisma, especially into a kid who has zero charisma. Zero charisma, you see? And we said, Vince, you've made a big error here, Vince. You know that. But Vince will not admit this.
6 years worth not of admitting it.
Intentionally. So what does Vince have to do? He has to load the cards with Andre the Giant. He has to load these cards up to draw folks in. And all of a sudden you've got these fans out here writing howdy doody on the signs, right?
He legitimately did not like that, right?
Who?
Bob.
Oh, it's disturbing, you know, and you've got fans writing and drawing a picture of howdy doody in Madison Square Garden, and that is your champion. And Vince McMahon knows he has made the error of his career, but he will not admit it, he will not acknowledge it, he will not recognize it, and he will not correct it. I said, Vince, we teased several times, Ivan Koloff and I teased turning me babyface, like do a little high spot attack match, and somebody would duck and I would hit Ivan, or Ivan would hit me or something, and then I would come back and Ivan would drop down to one knee in the garden, and people would stand to their feet begging me to take out Ivan Koloff, my tag team partner. So the babyface in me was there. All he had to do was convert me to a babyface.
Why didn't he?
Because he was committed and he had an ego and he refused to accept that he made a mistake with Bob Backlund, which went down in history as the biggest mistake ever in naming a champion in the history of professional wrestling. Usually the best artist wins. The man with the Dusty Rhodes and the Jimmy Valiants and the Bruno Sammartino. But in this case, the best artist, me, didn't win. And they had a guy who the fans were drawing pictures of and calling howdy doody. Horrible. But Vince, I like my robe, Vince. Childlike. A childlike, almost retarded statement. Not demeaning Bob Backlund, but so childlike as bordering on being retarded. But Vince, I like my robe. And Vince is saying, Bobby, is the belt. My God, show the fans the belt. And this went back and forth, man, right before we're going out to the ring. And he walked out there with the robe on, brother.
Well, but I guess Vince put his foot down because shortly thereafter they didn't get the short deal he had there. Well, one thing Vince didn't do wrong, in fact he did it right back in April of '77, from a fiscal standpoint, from an entertainment standpoint, and from the standpoint of the business, when you look at it as a bigger picture, was he gave you front and center and gave you the belt and made you the star.
Yes.
And we talked earlier about Hogan and Jesse and all the people you inspired. After that, in a much smaller degree, you're kind of responsible for this company because the first match I ever saw on a big giant black and white television in 1977, at the spry age of 5 years old at Timmy the Bookie's house, who would go on to become a very successful bookie, was the WWR 9 broadcast at 5 o'clock at Championship Wrestling, and it was your image on the television. So I thank you for that.
WOR.
Yeah, Channel 9.
Like at midnight or something?
Exactly, it was like a 5 or 6 o'clock broadcast they were doing.
And then they showed it again late at night, didn't they?
They did. They ran midnights also.
They ran midnight.
So I thank you for that, and I thank you for this. Reliving
Oh.
1977 and 78 with me.
I
Appreciate it.
found out some things I forgot that I didn't know.
Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't
You
know.
know, no, it's a
The
good
rest of the
thing.
night.
It's a good thing. But the sad ending of the story is that Vince did not fix the situation that he created. He saw the potential of me being a huge baby face. Huge baby face, entertaining. You know, I had the entertainment value, the promos and the color and the flexing, the whole package, the entertainment value, and he knew it, but he would not go back on his commitment, and I don't know why. I don't know if it was ego, refused to admit
Probably, yeah.
that he made a mistake, and he stayed with it, and that is a very unfortunate situation. I went on to have my career, but there was a missed opportunity, a huge missed opportunity, and he struggled and struggled.
That turn with the marketing that you proposed
Yeah.
would have been a Hogan
Yeah.
1984 run
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
1977.
Yeah. Exactly what Harley Race told me while leaving the LA Sports Arena.
Really?
While Hogan was wrestling Paul Orndorff. He said, Billy, this was you. It should have been you 10 years ago. Harley Race. Prophecy. Saying, this could have been you. This should have been you in 77. This should have been you. It was right there. It was right there in his hands. And he let it slip through his hands. So that is really an amazing thing that could only happen in a business with predetermined winners and losers, not in real sports,
Right.
where you hit a real home run,
Yeah.
catch a touchdown. Only in this profession that has predetermined winners and losers, and that is scripted and that is programmed, can something like that happen.
Because it's in the fate's in the hands of the decision makers.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Yes.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.